My guest at this time is Elena Nikitina. She is a resident of Ohio, but grew up in Russia. She is the survivor of a brutal kidnapping and abduction and tells her harrowing story in Girl Taken, a true story of abduction, captivity, and survival. She joins us now to share that story. And Elena, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
You were born and raised in Russia. What part of Russia and how close was your town to Chechnya?
So I was born actually in a country that does not exist anymore, Soviet Union. My city, Astrakhan, I grew up over there. It was bordering with Chechnya. It's maybe a couple hours driving.
And how old were you when you were taken?
It was just 3 weeks after my 21st birthday.
How did your abduction happen? What were you doing that day?
It happened on the evening of October 4th, 1994, and I was actually with my friends hanging out at the restaurant, and I went into the argument with my boyfriend, and I decided to leave the party. And the next thing I knew, I was in a car surrounded by the strange men speaking in foreign language.
Did they say anything you could understand?
No, I didn't. They spoke different foreign language, and for weeks I didn't know why I was there, who they were, and what they wanted. A few weeks later, they let me know that I was taken to Chechnya, and they were trying to ransom me back to my mom.
Where did they take you in Chechnya? Describe the building that you were in.
They moved me 3 times. First place, I did not remember clearly because I was under influence of some kind of drug or something. But the second place was, it was just a tiny room, and they kept me there for a few months. Then they moved me to another place that happened to be one of the abductors' family. So they kept me there for some time. And the last place was mountain village, and they kept me in a little pit. So that were my places. They kept me there.
How were you treated in those places? Did they hurt you?
I would prefer to not go into the deep details about such events because they were elaborated upon in my book, Girl Taken. You know, there were good days and there were bad days, of course. But most of the time I was left alone, especially in the first place. So it's a hard topic to discuss in a few minutes. But
of course.
The most important thing that I'm alive and I'm safe and I live to tell my story.
Did they give you much to eat?
Not much, but they gave me something. Yes, of course, they sustained me. I don't know if you're familiar with with my book, but after a few months, the war broke out, and I think it kind of messed with abductors' plans, and they kept me for reserve, as it seemed to me. I was pretty sure that I was sold into slavery, but the war got on the way of the delivery, to my opinion.
Wow. So do you believe that they ever were in contact with your family for ransom, or was that just what they told you?
No, I spoke with my mom over the telephone once. Yes, they definitely were trying to ransom me back. But when the war broke out, all the telephone service was cut off. There was no electricity. There could be no negotiation for my release. And I believe they didn't know what to do with me at some point. Most likely they just kept me in reserve.
So you were held captive for about 8 months, correct?
Exactly 8 months, yes.
And explain the day you made your escape.
Yeah, you're right. No ransom was paid, neither I was exchanged. I just walked away. And of course, I can tell you that this event is the most unbelievable and thrilling in my whole life. I was trying to describe it in my book, Girl Taken, with all my passion and details, and I just can tell you that it was a moment I've been waiting for so long. It's about 245 days and nights. And I just don't even remember clearly how long I walked after I left the mountain village. For me, then it seemed like eternity. I just walked and walked without knowing where I was going and what or who I could meet on my way. I couldn't realize then, but now I understand that I was miraculously led by something or someone. And after some time, I saw the Russian authorities, and they confused me with a suicide bomber or the terrorist. They arrested me, but then they figured out who I was. A few hours later, I was inside of the military tank on the way to the border with another country, Dagestan, where the general of army took me to his home, and I met his wife and kids, and I took a shower, ate a dinner, and spent the night in their home waiting for my mom to come and pick me up.
And what was that reunion like?
It was a moment of happiness, like true, clear, ultimate happiness for me.
Did anyone ever find the people responsible for this?
No, they've never been caught. Never been caught. It's a little disturbing.
Let me ask you about how your life has changed in two ways. We'll start with perhaps the more negative and then the more positive. First, how did the captivity change your life for the long term?
It's hard to say because I don't know how it would be without it. I've learned a lot, of course, and I've learned how we can stay strong. I just can tell you from my personal experience that faith in God is the best you can hope for in a moment of total and all-embracing despair like that. And I think I just learned how to not take life for granted. That's the most valuable experience. That's the most valuable lesson. I was a victim of a war. I was a victim of criminals. It's still so emotional for me. The most valuable lesson is that we never know how strong we are and what we're capable of until we put in a situation like that. We just have to decide if you want to stay a victim or become a survivor.
Many people would think that it would be painful to relive all this as you wrote the book. Ultimately, you wrote it out so your mother would know the story and then turn into a book. But you, from what I've read, it's actually been very therapeutic for you because you've gotten a lot of feedback from other people who have really appreciated you sharing this story, and it's been helpful to them for various reasons as well, right?
Absolutely correct. And when I decided to write a book, and I had no idea if I even remember the events or details, and I just predicted like a 10-page story. And because before I never let myself to rake through my memory because it was so painful. But 23 years later, I was feeling the confidence and the ability. And once I started to dig out my memory, my first memory, I couldn't stop, and the writing process was rather painful, and I took it as a therapy. But I was wrong because the real therapy, real and true healing therapy, came afterwards with the feedback that I received from people I didn't know. I think for me it means everything. It means so much that my book can help in some way or make people think or move their feelings. This is amazing. This is priceless.
Elena, when did you come to America, and why did you come to America?
I came to America and asked for political asylum because there were some events that after my captivity that brought me here. I didn't mention it in the book for some reason, but I was granted political asylum, and it was in 2000.
Do you care to elaborate on why you sought political asylum?
It's a long story, and it's. I think I may have a chance to write another book about those events later. I just didn't see the way to live in my country anymore because I was threatened, and I was heavily imposed by another religion forcing over me. And it took place also during my ordeal and right after I came back home. So I just decided to come to a better place, and here I am.
And lastly, how would you describe your life in America?
I just love it. It's amazing. And I'm a real estate agent licensed in Ohio. I have my 16-year-old daughter, Amalia. I love it. I do a lot of things for fun as my hobby. I'm just enjoying my life here. My mom is here as well. She came in 2006. I don't have any regrets. I really love this country.
You love being in America.
Oh, I do. I certainly do.
Elena, it's an amazing story. I'm sorry, that, of course, that you had to go through it, but I'm glad to know that others have been helped by your willingness to share that difficult experience, and we thank you very much for your time today as well.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Elena Nikitina is a resident of Ohio. She grew up in Russia. Survival of a brutal kidnapping and abduction. And her book is Girl Taken, A True Story of Abduction, Captivity, and Survival. I'm Greg Columbus reporting for Radio America.